And what your job is.
Okay, hi. I'm Dr. Mikol Davis, and I work as a clinical psychologist, and what that is that I've been treating people over the last 39 years that have problems related to depression and anxiety. I work with kids and I also work with adults.
Thank you. And so what is it? So there's the typical test where there's like ink splotches and people, and you have them say what they see. Do you know what the test is called?
Okay, you're talking about something called a Rorschach.
Okay.
Okay, and the Rorschach is basically a personality test, and it is a number of about, I think it's about half a dozen ink blots, and the way that it came about was someone named Rorschach was looking out into the sky and looked at the clouds, and as he looked at the clouds, he looked at different shapes in the clouds, and some of the shapes of the clouds reminded him of certain things. People interacting, animals, all kinds of stuff, but he thought, as a psychologist, I wonder if I could use this as a tool to show to people and have them describe what they see when I show them these ink blots. And lo and behold, he would show them these ink blots and people would come up with these amazing stories of what different things they would see in these ink blots. And a lot of times what we found was what they then projected onto these ink blots were their own internal world, what was going on within them. So if they were having conflict in their life, they would see conflict. If they were feeling peace and tranquility, that's what they would project. Lots of different things that would come about that they would project. And so they use this as obviously an illusion, so to speak. And actually the correct answer, if ever you're asked to look at these ink blots, and the answer and the instructor asks you, what do you see here? The answer that will always mess with the person that's giving it to you is if you say, oh, those are ink blots.
That's good.
And you don't say anything else. But people go on and on and on and on. And so it became an interesting tool for psychologists to be able to have a very quick way of being able to reveal on the outside what are the internal dynamics of what's going on within a person.
Okay. So when they have the ink blots, do the doctors kind of know what what they generally make up? Is there an answer that they expect to get back, or is it completely random?
So, very good question. There are 3 volumes of books, very thick books, that go into great detail about the ways of which that people respond. Do they respond to, for example, some of the cards, their ink blots are color. Color evokes emotion. Do they bring out emotion? Or are they people that are even in the middle of these, like ink blots that have red and stuff, are they reserved and they just hold it in? So to answer your question, yes, they have normative data that they looked at over thousands and thousands of people of what seems to be, quote unquote, a normal response and what is on the fringes. And so what they look at is, for example, if the person said, oh, I see it looks like a bear, and the instructor then would say, oh, show me where you see the bear. And they would then show with their finger and they'd point to an outline of what looked like a bear. Well, let's say thousands of people see it as something quite different, then that's outside of the norm, so to speak, when people do this. People that are really disturbed, what they start doing is they start telling you stories about things that they see. And if you say, oh, show me what you're seeing, where is it, what is it about this that says that it's an army and there are people that are shooting and you could see people are dead and whatever, and you look at it and there's nothing there. What you see more and more is that this really brings out a lot of psychological disturbance in people a lot of times because of how they project onto it. So a lot of it is, what is the determinant that gives you the reason that you think this is X or Y. Is it shape? Is it color? What is it that is the determinant? And yes, it's normed, and now they use computers. So it's computer graphed, and it's a much easier way now to be able to compare and contrast what people's response are and to determine if it's within the norm and whether or not it's indicative of certain things. So people, for example, that are depressed or anxious will have certain kinds of profiles typically versus people that aren't.
What percentage of people would you say are usually outside of the norm?
I think I think that part of the answer to your question is that we generally will see a normal bell-shaped curve, and so as you know that with a normal bell-shaped curve, most of the people, primarily, say about 80%, fit within what is considered the norm. It's usually the 10% that's on the other extremes.
Do you use it in your practice?
I haven't been using it for a while, but I've been in practice for 39 years, and I used it a lot initially as a part of testing, and it's still actually used quite a bit in testing.
So how come you stopped using it?
You know, over the years, there are things that sometimes through experience that you can kind of glean from meeting with people where you can save yourself a lot of time. And I find that if you ask the right questions a lot of times, you can get the kind of information that you need clinically to be able to deal with this.
What was one of the more dramatic experiences you've had with showing someone one of these graphs? If you're allowed to disclose that information.
No, sure. I mean, I'm not saying names. Answer your question would be, I've seen people get very, very upset by looking at these things, which amazes me because they're just ink blots. But they get really, really upset, and what you see that is kind of played out when you use these, what I think is rather kind of neutral ink blots, is that you see people's pathology. You see a lot of the demons that are affecting people that they project onto that as something that's neutral, but it projects on the outside of what's going on the inside.
I believe that is all, actually.
One of the things I wanted to add for you,
yeah.
Okay, because you're talking about illusion, right? Okay. Something really quickly that you might take notice about. I initially started working with children a lot when I first started out, and very quickly I first started out and worked in a pediatrician's office where I worked as a psychologist, and this pediatrician was an older gentleman that kind of took a liking to me and wanted to teach me things about working with children, and basically said, you know, Sonny, anything that you've learned in graduate school, you know nothing about kids. I'm going to show you some things to do when it comes to working with children. And so this man proceeded to take me into his consulting room where he had to give a little kid an injection. And he said, now watch what I'm going to do. So he walks up to the kid, and he takes out some very simple, like, you know, magic, okay? And he says to the kid, it wasn't this one, I think it was another one that he did where he, I think he used something like this where he said, okay, now, I want you to see I've got an egg. And he said, I want you to, now take the egg, I'm going to give you the egg, and he would go something like that very quickly, and the kid would look and go, hey, what happened? And so you would do an illusion with the kid in front of his face, immediately get the kid like very much focused on the illusion. Because psychologically, when we see something that our minds get tricked, we immediately try to problem solve and figure out what's going on here. And so you would use it, and you would say, you know what, I'm going to show you a little more magic. I've got to do this injection. It's going to hurt for a minute, but then I can do a little bit more magic. Proceed to give the kid the shot, no crying, nothing. He would show him some magic and send him on his way. And he said, there's something to be learned by this because you change the dynamic of a relationship with people, particularly people that are coming to see you that aren't necessarily direct consumers. They don't want to be there. A little kid didn't want to be there. A little kid that comes to a shrink's office doesn't want to be there. They're there because they didn't wake up in the morning and say, I want to go see a shrink. They wake up in the morning because their parents say, guess you're in trouble or whatever the problem is. He said, as soon as you change the dynamic where the kid wants something from you, magic happens, because then the relationship is different. And if you can use the illusion that you can through using magic to be able to craft and develop a relationship with people, that's really powerful.
Interesting. I see that you have multiple magic contraptions over there. What do you use them for?
Again, particularly when kids first come in here and they're uncomfortable with dealing with some adult and understand something about why they're here, but I really need to develop a quick rapport and establish a relationship with them, I'll use magic a lot in the very beginning, and I use that for that purpose to develop a relationship.
Sounds great. Anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
Thank you so much.